Maybe I didn't love you.
They said you had to be in Nashville to make it in country music. They were wrong. One label proved it. From a city nobody expected, with artists nobody had heard of, they built something Nashville couldn't ignore. No big money, no powerful connections.
You'll have that time.
Just raw talent and a different way of doing things. And here's what the history books left out. Nashville tried to stop them, not once, but again and again. The suits laughed. The gatekeepers looked away. But the people, the real country music fans, they listened.
Keeps dragging on.
And they kept listening. 10 recordings, 10 moments, 10 times this little label stood up to the biggest machine in American music. And won. This is the story they never wanted told. Stay right there. Number 10 will change the way you hear country music forever. Number 10, Marty Robbins, El Paso, 1959. Close your eyes for a second and think about this. It is 1959. Country radio had a strict idea of what a country song should sound like. It should be short. It should be simple. It should clock in somewhere around 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 at a stretch. Then along comes a song that runs almost 5 minutes long.
With a Mexican girl.
A full cinematic Western story, gunfights, a cantina, a girl named Felina, a man riding back to his death because love will not let him turn around. That song was El Paso, and Columbia Records had the nerve to release it exactly as it was. No edits, no cuts. 5 minutes of pure storytelling.
Nighttime would find me in Rose's Cantina. Music would play.
Marty Robbins recorded it at Columbia's Nashville studio with producer Don Law. Law was one of the few producers of that era who understood that sometimes a song needs room to breathe. He did not try to shorten it. He did not try to modernize it. He just let Marty-O tell the story.
And Felina would whirl.
The lyrics are about a cowboy who falls for a Mexican girl at a cantina called Rosa's Cantina in El Paso, Texas. He kills a man over her. He rides out into the desert to escape, but he cannot stay away. He rides back, knowing it will probably get him killed. And it does. But he dies with her holding him.
Blacker than night were the eyes of Felina, wicked and evil.
And somehow, that feels like the only ending that could ever be right. El Paso went to #1 on the Billboard Country Chart. Then it crossed over to #1 on the Pop Chart, too. Then it won the Grammy for Best Country and Western Recording in 1961. It was the first country song to win a Grammy in that category.
While casting a spell.
Here is your fun fact. Radio stations did not want to play it at first. 5 minutes was simply too long. Program directors told Columbia it would never get airplay. Columbia pushed anyway, and the public response was so huge that stations had no choice but to spin it.
My love was deep for this Mexican maiden. I was in love, but
The song proved something important. It proved that country music fans were not afraid of a long story. They were not afraid of depth. They wanted it. They had always wanted it. Why is it underrated today? Honestly, it is not forgotten by the people who know country music history.
in vain I could tell.
But for younger listeners, it often gets lumped in as an oldies curiosity rather than what it really is, a masterpiece of American storytelling that changed what country music could be. Columbia took a risk. It paid off, and it set a tone for everything that came after. But if you think El Paso was brave, wait until you hear what number 9 almost cost its artist. Number 9, Johnny Cash.
Love is a burning thing.
1963 now, I know what you might be thinking. Ring of Fire? That is one of the most famous country songs ever made. How is that hidden or underrated? Stay with me, because the story behind this record is one of the most fascinating things Columbia Records ever did.
And it makes a fiery ring.
And most people only know half of it. Ring of Fire was written in 1963. It came out of a very real and very complicated love story. The song speaks to being consumed by love, the kind of love that burns, the kind that you fall into and cannot climb out of even if you wanted to.
Bound by wild.
Producer Don Law was back in the room again. Cash had been developing his sound for years at Columbia, but this song was different from the moment they brought it in, because Cash wanted to add something that nobody expected in a country record: mariachi-style brass horns.
Desire. I felt.
You have to understand what that meant in 1963 Nashville. The country music establishment had very strict ideas about what a country record should sound like. Steel guitar, fiddle, maybe some piano. Horns from a Mexican musical tradition? That was not just unusual. That was seen as an outright invasion.
Into a ring of fire. I fell in.
Some people inside the Nashville scene thought it was a gimmick. Radio programmers were skeptical. There were real conversations about whether this song was even country music at all. Columbia backed it anyway. They put it out. And within weeks, it was climbing the charts. It hit #1 on the Billboard Country chart and stayed there for 7 weeks.
To a burning ring of fire. I went down, down, down.
7 weeks. Here is your fun fact. The brass horn arrangement was inspired by a dream. The story goes that Cash heard the horns in a vision while the song was still being shaped. He woke up knowing exactly what the record needed to sound like, and he was not willing to let anyone talk him out of it.
And the flames went higher, and it burns, burns, burns.
Why does this belong on this list? Because the fight to get those horns on that record was real. Because Columbia stood in the gap and protected an artistic choice that Nashville did not understand. Because without that decision, country music might never have learned that it could borrow from other sounds and still be completely, undeniably itself.
The ring of fire, the ring of fire.
Ring of Fire did not just become a hit. It became a definition. When people around the world think of American country music, this is often the first thing they hear in their heads. The next entry shows what happens when Columbia Records backed an artist Nashville truly did not want. Hey, if you are enjoying this deep dive into country music history, go ahead and smash that like button right now. It really does help keep these kinds of videos going. Okay, back to the countdown.
Hello, I'm Johnny Kaye.
If you love real country music and the stories behind the legends, make sure you subscribe to Country Lore. This channel is for people who truly appreciate the roots of country. Many of these country legends are slowly being forgotten, but their stories deserve to live on. By subscribing, you're helping keep their music and legacy alive for the next generation. And if these songs bring back memories for you, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It's completely free, and it helps us continue sharing the classic country stories that made this music so special. Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 8, Ray Price, Crazy Arms, 1956. Let me paint you a picture. It is 1956. Honky-tonk music is the sound of working people. Men coming off a long shift. Women who have been left behind. People who want to dance just a little and hurt just a little at the same time. Ray Price was one of the finest voices in that world. Smooth but rough around the edges. The kind of voice that sounds like it has lived a few lives and is not apologizing for any of them. Crazy Arms was recorded for Columbia Records in Nashville. The producer was Don Law, the same man who had guided so many Columbia country sessions during this era. The song is about a man whose arms still reach for a woman who is gone. His heart knows it is over. His body has not gotten the message yet. If you have ever been through a bad breakup, you know exactly what that song is describing. It went to #1 on the Billboard Country chart and stayed there for 20 weeks. 20 weeks. That is almost 5 months at the top of the chart. That is not a hit. That is a cultural moment. It also helped establish the signature Ray Price shuffle, a 4/4 walking bassline rhythm that would become one of the most imitated sounds in traditional country music. Bands all across the South started copying it. Producers started chasing it. It defined a sound. Here is your fun fact. The song was Ray Price's first #1 single. He had been recording for Columbia for a few years with moderate success. Some inside the label had started to wonder if he was going to break through. Crazy Arms answered that question loudly. Why is it underrated? Because the honky-tonk era gets treated like a footnote in modern country music history. People talk about the outlaw movement of the 1970s and the pop crossover of the 1980s. But the working-class heartbreak of the 1950s honky-tonk scene is where so much of this music came from. Ray Price and records like this one are the foundation that everything else was built on. Columbia understood that foundation. They invested in it, and it paid back in music that still hits hard the moment you hear it. The next story is where the artist almost walked away before the magic happened. Number 7. Bob Dylan, Nashville Skyline Era. Lay Lady Lay, 1969. I know what you are thinking. Bob Dylan? On a country music countdown? Stay right there, because this is one of the most important things Columbia Records ever did for country music. Even if it looked like anything but country music from the outside, it is 1969. Bob Dylan has just made the Nashville Skyline album at Columbia's studio in Nashville. He recorded with some of the finest session musicians in Nashville. He used that warm, rolling, country-flavored sound that the city had been perfecting for decades. And the result was something neither the folk world nor the country world knew quite what to do with. Lay Lady Lay is the centerpiece of that record. It is a love song, gentle, open, deeply personal, and it sounds like country music even if the man singing it was not a country artist by any traditional definition. Bob Johnston produced the album. Johnston was a Columbia man who had worked with Cash and others in Nashville. He understood the studios there. He understood the musicians. He created an environment where Dylan could simply relax and sing, which is what you hear on this record. A man completely at ease. The song reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. But more importantly, it reached number 7 on the country chart too. A folk rock poet from Minnesota crossing over into country territory through a Nashville recording. Here is your fun fact. Dylan originally wrote the song for the film Midnight Cowboy. He missed the deadline. The film used different music, but the song found its way to the world anyway, which honestly might have been the better outcome. Why does this belong here? Because Columbia's decision to bring Dylan into Nashville and let him make a country record without forcing him to sound like a Nashville artist was radical. It said that country music could hold more than one kind of voice. It said the studios and the players and the feeling of that city belonged to anyone with something true to say. Nashville did not always love that idea, but Columbia kept pushing it. And the next entry is where that tension between Nashville and Columbia started to become something the whole industry could feel. Number 6. Tammy Wynette, Stand By Your Man, 1968.
Sometimes it's hard to be bad times, and he'll have.
And right here, I want to pause and say something, because we are going to come back to this entry later in the video. There is a controversy attached to this song and to Columbia Records that I want to give its proper time. So hold that thought. But first, the song itself. It is 1968.
A woman, given times, doing things that you don't.
Tammy Wynette is one of the most powerful voices in country music, and Stand By Your Man is about to become one of the most debated songs ever recorded in any genre. The song is simple on the surface. It is a woman saying she will stand by the man she loves even when he is difficult.
You know your love to just one man, but if you love him,
Even when he makes mistakes, even when it is not easy. Producer Billy Sherrill recorded this at Columbia's Nashville studio. Sherrill was one of the architects of what people called the countrypolitan sound. Smooth strings, lush production, softer edge that crossed country over into pop territory. The song was recorded in about 20 minutes. Number 5, Waylon Jennings. Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way, 1975. Okay, now we are getting into the heart of this thing. Because this song is not just a great country record. It is a direct message to Nashville. It is Waylon Jennings standing on a stage and asking the music industry a question it did not want to answer. Are you sure this is the way it has to be done? Are you sure the suits and the session players and the controlled studio system are really what country music is supposed to be? Waylon recorded this for RCA, but his whole movement of this era was deeply tied to the outlaw country push that Columbia artists had helped ignite.
It's the same old.
This song arrived at a moment when Nashville's establishment was under pressure from artists who wanted to produce their own records, use their own bands, and make music that felt real rather than polished and manufactured. Wait, you are right to notice that.
Tune, fiddle and guitar. Where do we take it from here?
This is the spot in the countdown where I have to tell you something honest. Waylon was on RCA, not Columbia, but his story belongs on this list for a different reason. Because it was Columbia's willingness to back outlaws and rebels, from Cash to Dylan to others,
Rhinestone suits and new shiny cars,
that helped create the cultural permission for Waylon and Willie and the whole outlaw movement to exist. Columbia planted seeds. The outlaw movement grew in their soil, even when those artists were on other labels. And that matters.
it's been the same way for years.
This song went to number 1 in 1975, and became an anthem for every artist who felt like Nashville was a machine they were trapped in. The lyrics call out the overproduced, overmanaged, committee-approved nature of Music Row.
Somebody told me when I first got to
And they do it with a grin that makes you love the honesty. Here is your fun fact. Some Nashville insiders were genuinely offended by this song. Not angry offended, personally offended. Like Waylon had walked into their living room.
Nashville. Oh, she finally got it made. Oh, Hank made.
And called their house ugly. There were real conversations behind closed doors about whether radio should push back. Why is it underrated? Because people know the song, but they do not always understand what it costs to make it.
It is here. Now we're all sure that you will, but I don't think Hank done it this way.
The Outlaw movement was not just a musical style. It was a genuine fight between artists and an industry that wanted to own them. This song is one of the clearest statements of that fight ever put to tape. The next entry changed what country music was allowed to say about real life. Number 4, Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison Blues, live at Folsom Prison, 1968.
I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling around the bend, and blowing. I hang my head and cry. The Tennessee Three.
You already know this song, but do you know what it cost to make this record? It is January 1968. Columbia Records and producer Bob Johnston have agreed to let Cash record a live album inside Folsom State Prison in California.
I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom.
Not a concert, not a charity event. A real album recording inside a real prison with real inmates as the audience. Nashville was not comfortable with this. Parts of the industry thought it was a stunt. Parts thought it was dangerous. Parts thought it sent the wrong message about what country music should represent.
From prison, and time keeps dragging on.
Columbia backed it. Bob Johnston backed it. And Cash walked into that prison with his band and played one of the most powerful sets of music ever captured on tape. The prisoners roared. The recording captured something raw and human that no studio session could ever replicate.
But that train keeps rolling on down the...
Men who had lost their freedom listening to a man who understood what it felt like to be trapped not by bars, but by addiction, by darkness, by the parts of yourself you cannot outrun. The album hit #1 on the country chart and crossed over to the mainstream pop chart too.
Plan and tone. When I was just a baby, my mom...
It introduced Cash to a whole generation of listeners who had not been paying attention. And it turned Folsom Prison Blues from a great song into something close to a sacred text. Here is your fun fact. The original studio version of Folsom Prison Blues had been recorded years earlier.
Mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with... I bet there's rich folks eating in a fancy dining car.
Cash had been trying to get Columbia to agree to the live prison album for a long time. He had actually performed at prisons before without recording it. When Johnston finally said yes, Cash was ready. He had been rehearsing for this moment for years. Why does it still matter?
With guns, but I shot a man in Reno just to watch him. They're probably drinking coffee and smoking big cigars. Well, I know
Because this album proved that country music's audience was not fragile. They could handle the truth. They could handle a song about a man who shot another man just to watch him die. They could handle the sound of prisoners cheering because someone finally saw them as human beings.
Yeah, watch him die. Hear that whistle, I had it coming. I know I can't be free.
Columbia took a risk that Nashville did not want to take, and the result was one of the greatest live albums in the history of American music. But if you think the Prison album caused controversy, wait until we get to number 3, because that one divided Nashville straight down the middle. Number 3, Tammy Wynette, Stand By Your Man, 1968.
Sometimes it's hard to be a stand by your man.
Remember earlier I told you we would come back to Tammy Wynette and Stand By Your Man? Here we are. This is the controversy segment, and I want to be fair about this. I want to give you the full picture, because the truth is more complicated than most people know. When Stand By Your Man came out in 1968, it was an immediate commercial success. #1 country, crossing over to pop, selling around the world. By almost every measure, it was a triumph for Columbia Records and for Tammy Wynette.
Your love to just one man, something more to come to when nights.
Then the conversation started. This was 1968. The women's rights movement in America was growing louder and more visible. And here was one of the biggest songs of the year, telling women to stand by their man even when he was difficult or made mistakes.
You'll have that a cold and lonely stand by you.
Some people heard that as beautiful loyalty. Others heard it as a message that women should accept poor treatment and stay quiet about it. In interviews, it has been said that Tammy Wynette was genuinely surprised by the reaction. She has spoken about writing the song from a place of love.
And he'll have good time and show the world.
Not submission. She saw it as a woman making a free choice to love someone fully, not as a statement that women should accept harm. There are different versions of this story, depending on who you ask.
Doing things that you don't feel like. Keep giving all the love.
Some people say the song was a genuine expression of traditional values that resonated deeply with a huge portion of the American public, particularly working-class women, who understood the complicated reality of long-term relationships.
Understand. You can.
Others say the song arrived at exactly the wrong cultural moment and reinforced ideas that were already causing harm to women who felt they had no choice but to stay in bad situations. What is not disputed is what happened next.
But if you love him, you'll forget by
Radio stations in certain markets were cautious about how heavily they played it. Some women's groups publicly criticized it. And in 1992, more than 2 decades later, a famous political figure made a comment about the song during a national interview that reignited the entire debate.
give him, even though stand by.
And put Tammy Wynette back in the middle of a cultural firestorm she had never asked for. Nashville's gatekeeping around this song was not about stopping it. The song was too big to stop. The gatekeeping was more subtle. It was about how the song was talked about, whether it was framed as a statement or as a story.
He's hard to understand.
Whether Tammy Wynette was seen as an artist making a creative choice, or as a symbol of something the industry wanted to use. Columbia Records, to their credit, stood behind the record and behind Tammy. They did not distance themselves when the controversy grew. They did not reissue it with different framing or try to soften what it was. And here is what I think this controversy actually says about country music. Country music has always been the music of real life. Not idealized life, not comfortable life. Real life. And real life includes complicated love. It includes choices that other people do not always understand. It includes loyalty that looks like weakness from the outside and feels like strength from the inside. Stand By Your Man is not a perfect song for everyone. But it is an honest song. And honesty is the one thing Nashville has always been both proud of and terrified of at the same time. Columbia put it out. The world argued about it. And 40 years later, people are still arguing. That is not a failure. That is art doing its job.
He's just a man.
The next song is one that very few people talk about today, but absolutely deserves to be on this list. We are roughly halfway through, and I want to ask you something. Which song has hit you hardest so far? Drop it in the comments right now. I read every single one. Okay, 2 more to go before we hit number 1. Number 2, Willie Nelson, Always on My Mind, 1982.
Quite as often as I could have.
Willie Nelson recorded this song for Columbia Records in 1982, and it became one of the defining recordings of his entire career. Now here is the thing. Always on My Mind was not a new song in 1982. It had been around for about a decade. Other artists had recorded it.
Maybe I didn't treat you.
Elvis Presley had a version. Brenda Lee had a version. The song had already lived a whole life before Willie got hold of it. But what Willie and producer Chips Moman did with it at Columbia is what turned it from a song into an experience. Willie's version is slower, more spacious. The production is warm but restrained.
Quite as good.
There are no tricks. No big orchestration trying to manufacture emotion. Just a voice that sounds like it has genuinely done the thing the song is describing, loving someone and failing to show it properly, and knowing it and living with it.
As I should have.
The lyrics are from the perspective of someone acknowledging they did not treat the person they loved as well as they should have. They thought about them all the time, but maybe they did not say it enough. Maybe they got busy. Maybe life got in the way.
If I made you feel second best.
And now they are standing in the wreckage of that, trying to find the right words. It hit number 1 on the Billboard Country chart. It also won Grammy Awards for Best Male Country Vocal Performance and Best Country Song. And the album it came from went platinum.
Girl, I'm sorry I was blind.
Here is your fun fact. Willie recorded this as part of an album called Always on My Mind that was put together quickly and without a lot of pressure attached to it. Some of the songs came together in just a few days of recording. The looseness of those sessions is part of why the record sounds the way it does. Nobody was overthinking it. They were just playing. Why does it belong on this list? Because in 1982, Nashville was moving hard toward a shinier, more polished sound. pop country was taking over. Young artists with big hair and synthesizers were getting all the radio attention.
You were always on my mind.
Willie Nelson putting out a record this quiet and this honest and this old-fashioned in its emotional directness was almost a rebellious act. And Columbia backed it completely. No pressure to modernize. No request to add a bigger sound.
You were always on my.
Just trust in an artist and a song. That trust produced one of the greatest country recordings of the decade. And now, number one. This is the one that changed everything. This is the one that made Nashville realize Columbia was not just a label. It was a force.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
If you love real country music and the stories behind the legends, make sure you subscribe to Country Lore. This channel is for people who truly appreciate the roots of country. Many of these country legends are slowly being forgotten, but their stories deserve to live on. By subscribing, you're helping keep their music and legacy alive for the next generation. And if these songs bring back memories for you, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It's completely free, and it helps us continue sharing the classic country stories that made this music so special. Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number one, Johnny Cash, Hurt, 2002.
Today, I hurt myself.
When I know, you might be sitting there saying, wait, that is a cover song. That is a 9 Inch Nails song. How does that go to number one on a country list? Let me tell you something. Hurt is the most important thing Columbia Records ever did in country music.
I still feel to see if I.
Not the biggest hit, not the most commercial success, but the most important. Here is what happened. It is 2002. Johnny Cash is in his 70s. He has been fighting serious health problems for years. His wife, June Carter Cash, is also unwell.
On the pain, I focus.
The music industry has largely moved on from him. Radio will not touch him. The Nashville establishment that had once celebrated him has gone quiet. But producer Rick Rubin, working with Cash on a series of American recordings albums distributed through Columbia, has a different idea.
Thing that's real, the only.
Rubin strips everything back. No band, no production tricks. Just Cash's voice, an acoustic guitar, and songs that feel like they were chosen specifically because they speak to where he is in his life. He brings in a song by Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails.
Tears a hole, the needle.
A song called Hurt, a song about addiction, about regret, about looking back at a life and seeing the damage. Cash records it, and what comes out of that session is so raw, so honest, so devastating, that even Trent Reznor, the man who wrote the song, said that it no longer felt like his song after he heard what Cash did with it.
Oh, familiar sting. The old.
The music video that went with the release showed Cash as an old man surrounded by the wreckage of his own legacy. Objects from his past, images of June, his own hands, which had once been the hands of a young man with everything ahead of him. MTV aired the video. VH1 aired the video.
Kill it all away. Try to kill.
Radio, the same radio that had ignored Cash for years, suddenly had to reckon with this. And Nashville? Nashville was complicated about it. Some people in the industry were moved. Some were embarrassed that it took a rock producer working outside the Nashville system to give Johnny Cash the career moment he deserved.
I remember everything, but
Some were proud that country music's greatest voice was getting his flowers. Some felt the whole thing was too unconventional to call country. Here is your fun fact. June Carter Cash passed away in May 2003. Johnny Cash passed away in September of that same year.
What have I seen?
The video for Hurt, which he had made while still very much alive, became one of the most viewed pieces of musical footage in the world in the months after his death. A man saying goodbye without knowing the whole world would be watching. Why is this number one? Because it represents everything this countdown has been about.
My sweet become.
A label willing to back an artist that the mainstream had written off. A producer willing to tear down convention to find the truth inside a song. A voice that had lived everything it was singing about. Columbia Records did not make Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash made Johnny Cash. But Columbia gave him a home, again and again and again.
Everyone is friend.
From the early days to the very end. And Hurt is the last word, the most important word. The one that proved that country music is not about young and pretty and shiny. It is about truth. It is about time. It is about what a voice sounds like when it has earned every single note it sings.